All right, so we've learned up to this point, we've learned how to use sliders, how to kind of incorporate those things. We've seen those examples. We've seen how to use custom functions. We've seen how to build equations and do stuff with that. Now we're at the point where we can start actually creating games and doing stuff like that. Um, which means that in order to do this and do this well, we really need to further organize our code into smaller things. So I'm going to show kind of bad examples of how to do things, and then show how, when we create it as an object, how it becomes simpler. Okay, the finished project, the finished product of what we're going to be creating, that's what you guys are going to be turning into me for this assignment. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a live example. So I have a blank document. Now, what we've learned up to this point is, let's say I have an X and a Y. Uh, oh, um, for a shape, maybe I have a color um, that I want to store for it. So maybe the color of this shape. So if we were doing something like this, we could say, X is at 50, Y is at 100. And then when I want to display, I'm drawing that rectangle or that circle. Let's do circles. I like circles. So let's do circles at that X and that Y, and I have a size. Okay, now if I run my code, this is where I'm at. There's my circle. Okay, we have learned that we can increment and decrement values so we can see things move across the screen. But now we got to start adding conditionals and stuff like that. The problem is that as you're doing this, our draw function is going to start getting very large and confusing. So maybe I might want to say if x is greater than the width of the canvas, then x is 0. So it just keeps moving to the right. As it gets to the end, it resets back over. But as I'm doing something like that, this is starting to get a lot more confusing. And what I want is this conditional is only dealing with this shape. I should have all of this nested inside its own thing. And that's where simple objects come in. Simple objects are a way for us to organize code instead of us just having all of these variables laying around. Because now, if I wanted to actually have it go a certain speed, if I wanted to have it switch directions, if I wanted to change the colors, all of that stuff, um, I'll have a separate variable for it, which means that for one single object, I'm thinking of a ball type object, I would end up having a lot of different variables. So this is not actually the way that we would want to build this. This would be what the old way. We want to actually get into now where we are encapsulating everything together in like a group. So if we start thinking in terms of an object, so let's call this a ball. And on my ball object is going to be created differently. So I'll leave this bad example. Bad example. Okay. Bad example of all that stuff. Okay. So the bad example, and now we're looking at the good example, where we create this ball. We have this variable right here that will hold this, and we use a code block to encapsulate everything in there. Now I can say, well, the x of that ball, let's say, is at 50. And then I separate all my attributes with commas. So I could say my y is, let's say, 100, so it'll be lower. I'm going to give it a color. So let's say that my color will be like a blue-green. So how about 0, 230, 255. Let's see what else. How would I want a size to this? Size, let's say 100. And then I want to build, like what we've learned about custom functions, I want to build a custom function. My custom function, I'm going to call it a display function, okay? And this function only exists inside of this ball object. Everything inside this set of brackets is the ball, okay? When I want to display my ball, I am going to display at these values. So when I'm referring to the attributes of that specific object, I need to use this keyword. So let's start with the fill, and we want to fill it with this color, okay? That's mentioned right here. That's what we set up. I want to draw that circle at this X, which is this one right here. I want to draw it at this Y, which is this right here. I want it to have this size, which is right here. Okay, so this is my display. Now I don't see anything even though I created this object. This exists, but it exists only in the setup. If I want to display it, then I have to call it. So my good example, here's a good example. Good example is to call that ball and just call the display. There is that shape right there. Now, if I want my ball to only color itself, then I can use the push and pop like what we've learned before, so that it's only doing its own thing. This X and this Y, let's actually move it down farther. I'm going to move it down to 200. So notice I'm only changing stuff here. I don't have to change anything down here. This display, all it's doing, I'm calling this custom object function to do what I need it to do. Okay, so this display, all it's responsible for is drawing the shape with the color, the X and Y position, and the size that I want it to have. I can create additional functions for this object. Maybe I have an update. Now notice every single one of these. The syntax is changing. Inside of an object, I'm using colons for each attribute. I'm putting a comma between each attribute value. Okay, if I want to have a custom function, I'm writing the function with a set of parentheses and a set of squiggle brackets. Okay, so if I want to build a new function, I have to write the name of the function, the set of parentheses, and a set of squiggle brackets. Inside of this squiggle brackets is the function that's only for this ball object. So I'm going to have an update. My update is to take my X position and I want to increase it up by 1. Then I can check, and I could say something like, hey, if this dot x is greater than the width of the screen, then I want to change, my position. So here is where I could actually start doing different things. So let's just, this dot x is equal to width divided by 2. I'm just going to do something very simple right now. Okay, so now if I'm going to update my ball, I can update just by calling this function. Now I don't have to worry what it's doing inside of the draw. So this is actually much cleaner. This, I don't have to worry about the implementation of what's happening inside of there, inside of the draw. I just have it running. Now if I want to make changes to it, maybe my X is actually decreasing or my Y is increasing or any of that stuff. Maybe whenever this happens, I'm resetting it and I'm changing the color to something else. So this dot color is now going to be some random color value. So I'm going to do random up to 255 for the red, the green, and the blue channels. This is all stuff that we've learned. We're just learning kind of how to organize. So now my update, when I get to the edge, I will switch colors. Look, there's a different color. I can't do that without having a lot of code in my way doing it with this bad example that we've seen before. I could write it, but it's going to start looking very ugly to do this, to have it change. I could, I guess, do like this. This is doing the bad way. This is not a good way to do it. Once we can get past this point, we can have more things happen. I can encapsulate stuff. So yes, I'm still able to do this, but what if I want to start keeping score every time that it hits? Then I got to have a separate variable for it, and I got to keep track of that variable. You guys have done things where you've had lots and lots of variables and it got tedious. If we start thinking in terms of like an object or a thing, like this is the design for my corner of my canvas. This is a player character. This is a button that I want to do something. Okay, we have a lot of ways that we could do this. So here, this display, notice that I'm separating stuff out. This display is only responsible for displaying the shape, color, the size, all of that stuff. If I wanted to do different things, I can add different functions. I'm not building it all into one. So this update right now, this is incrementing the X and then changing position. But this color, this might not be something that I want to do as an update. Maybe I want to do this as its own function that I only call at certain times. So let's say I call it a color change. That is a new function. I'm just going to cut this out of here and put it here. Okay. Now it's not changing the color, but I could say when this happens, then I could say this dot color change. That's what I want to run. So when this is true, then we're changing our X position, and I'm calling this function. So see how it changed colors? Which means that I could do a lot cooler stuff. We could start recreating the DVD logo. So for this walkthrough, I want just the bad example, just the good example, and look how much cleaner that is. When I don't need to see my ball object, I can clean it up just by minimizing it, and this just runs. Okay, it makes it a lot easier when you're trying to develop a lot of stuff. So for this walkthrough, all you got to do is you're just going to call this simple object walkthrough or object walkthrough. You're going to write a bad example. You're going to write a good example. Okay, that's what I want to see. This is very simple code. We're going to step up from this and start creating bigger and cooler stuff to try to do the DVD thing. So go ahead and create this, and then we can build off of that. Good luck.